So in this episode we are going to revisit Pandemonium 2. This game was developed by Crystal Dynamics and released in 1997, and it was the second game that I've ever played on the PlayStation 1 console, the first one being Mortal Kombat Trilogy. So one day, back in 1997, me and my brother went to one of these video game clubs. They used to have all these gaming consoles like the Sega Saturn, PS1, N64, and you could choose games to play. You could also rent or buy games, and they had like video game magazines and strategy guides, you know, that you could borrow and read, you know. It was amazing, you know. And so like as I was browsing, you know, for games to play, for whatever reason, maybe it was the box art, you know, with Nick and Fargus, you know, staring at you, or maybe I had seen this game like in a GamePro magazine or something like that. Whatever, but Pandemonium 2 happened to grab my attention on that day. And so as I started playing the game, my first impression was like, wow, like this game feels really fresh. First of all, Pandemonium 2 is a 2.5D platformer game, just like the first game. Basically we have 3D graphics, 2D gameplay, with the camera taking different angles, you know, creating that 3D illusion. And to be honest, I actually thought the game was actual 3D, you know, until I realized that I couldn't go to any direction I wanted, you know. I really liked the level design and the artistic direction they were going for. If you compare it to the first game, which was mostly based on fantasy, Pandemonium 2 introduced some sci-fi elements. Basically, we have the magical land of Lear, you know, and we have the comet of infinite possibilities, you know, passing over Lear for the first time after 300 years. And whoever reaches the comet gets like gains absolute power, you know. And so we have everybody racing to the comet, you know, including our two main characters, Nick and Fargus, and of course the main villain, Queen Zorcha. And depending on whom you're going to beat the game with, you get to see two different endings, which I think is really cool. But anyway, the fact that they took the story to space in this game really enabled the designers to go crazy, you know, in terms of visuals, you know, and it's like next level creative, you know, compared to the first game. If I had to compare the design of Pandemonium 2 to other franchises, I would probably compare it to maybe He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, or maybe Thundercats. And the reason is because you have basically like magic and the fantasy element combined with science fiction and technology, if you know what I mean. Another thing that I thought was really cool when I first played this game was the main character designs. Because usually in a platformer game, you know, the characters have this mascot design, you know, they all look like soft toys, you know, that you can win in a Luna Park, you know. But Nick and Fargus, you know, they looked humanoid, you know, which I thought was really cool and edgy, you know, and different. Something funny, I discovered that a lot of people have some serious issues, you know, with Nick's design in this game. A lot of people think that it's too over-sexualized or whatever, like, you know, the trend these days, you know. But if you've ever been to a circus, you know, or if you've ever watched any sports events, you know, where people do all these crazy jumps, you know, and backflips, climbing on ropes, basically everything that Nick is doing in this game, you've probably noticed that all these people tend to wear like minimal amount of clothes, you know, or like their clothing is very elastic, you know, and showing off their body, you know. And the reason is, you know, like when you do all these crazy stunts, you really want to be as comfortable and mobile as possible, you know. So from that point of view, I think Nick's design makes like perfect sense, you know, in this game compared to her design in the first game, where she looked like basically a clown meets schoolgirl, you know. But anyway, like I really don't care like what other people think, you know. I think Nick's design in Pandemonium 2 is really cool. Let's talk a little bit about the music in Pandemonium 2. If you compare it to the first game had a lot of like folk melodies, you know. It was very much influenced by the traditional Irish music, you know. It really gave that medieval fantasy vibe, you know. But in Pandemonium 2 we have a lot of like drum and bass and techno beats, some weird synthesizer sounds, you know. So it's very different, you know, from the first game. And it really matches, you know, the visuals, you know, the space, you know, like all these crazy psychedelic visuals in Pandemonium 2. Overall, I think the design of Pandemonium 2 is very much influenced by the rave culture of the 90s, you know. It's very colorful, very spacey, very trippy, you know, and it's probably one of the most psychedelic games that I've ever played. So anyway, as I was saying, I had played this game for a couple of times in a video game club, you know, but I could never get past the third level, you know. So I decided to rent the game, you know, for like a whole day. and try and beat it at home, you know. And so I actually managed to reach the final level, you know, without any cheat codes or anything like that, you know, but unfortunately I had to quit, you know, because I had to take the game back to the store. I ran out of time, you know, and the reason is because I was stuck, you know, literally for like probably 4 hours straight on the Mr. Schnobelen boss fight, you know, which was like super difficult. And then, you know, when I actually, when I finally reached the final level, you know, it was so large and, you know, like it really felt endless, you know, it had a lot of like backtracking, you know, and yeah, unfortunately I had to quit. I eventually managed to beat the game in the recent years, playing it on an emulator, but I also got the physical copy for my collection, you know, which I occasionally play on my PS3. Let's talk about the gameplay. Just like in the first game, you have 2 characters to choose from. And you can switch between them too while you are in the hub world, which by the way looks really cool. I think some extra attention was put into making it look interesting. But anyway, compared to the first game, here you have a bigger arsenal of moves. Like here you can hang on rails or platforms, you can climb ropes, you can operate vehicles like a tank, you know, or the Zol train, you know. You also get to operate a Megazord, you know, and you have these Mario movie boots, you know, that boost your jump. So Fargus and Nikki both have different gameplay styles. Nikki, of course, has double jump, just like in the first game, you know, which I think is really useful in a platforming game, you know. It gives you a lot of control and precision while platforming, you know, while Fargus has the roll attack, you know, and he can also throw his puppet seat, you know, and control it like telekinetically, you know, to attack the enemies or reach certain treasures that are otherwise not accessible to him. And then we have the 2 main power-ups, which is the lightning power-up and the fire power-up, you know, and the 2 of them affect differently, you know, each of the characters. Like for example, when Nikki is using the fire power-up, she can literally throw fireballs, you know, just like Liu Kang. While Fargus, he will catch fire, you know, and he will start running uncontrollably, killing all the enemies on his way. And here's another difference. When you play as Fargus, the fire power-up only lasts for a few seconds, while when you're playing as Nikki, you know, you will have the power-up until you get hit by an enemy. And then we have the lightning power-up. When you are using it as Nikki, she can shrink the enemies, you know, and kill them. But when you're using it as Fargus, you know, he can inflate the enemies, you know, and use them as an extra platform to reach areas, you know, that he normally can't, you know, because he doesn't have the double jump. So yeah, the gameplay in Pandemonium 2 is very versatile, you know, I would say. You have 2 different characters, 2 different gameplay styles, you know. If you want like an easier and smoother experience, you go for Nikki. But if you want like a more challenging experience, you go for Fargus, you know, just like in the first game basically. And now let's talk about some of the things that I personally didn't like in this game. Now, just like the first game, Pandemonium 2 is extremely difficult and frustrating. To a point where it's not fun anymore, you know? Like, I would say a good 50% of this game can only be passed by luck. And just like in the first game, Pandemonium 2 doesn't have a saving system, because that was a success in the first game, right? You know, why wouldn't we do it here too? Yeah, so basically when you pass the level, you get a password, you know, and in case it's game over and you want to start where you left off, you know, you need to go to the password screen, you know, input the last password that you were given, you know, and then you can continue the game. In my opinion, it's a massive pain in the ass, and sometimes that could be the factor which would appall me from playing this game. But of course, the password screen also allows you to input all these cheat codes, you know, like invincibility and endless lives, you know. And that's how I personally prefer to play this game, you know, because that's when it actually becomes enjoyable and fun, you know. Because nowadays, when I play video games, you know, I like to be relaxed, you know, I like to enjoy the experience. I don't have time, you know, to play the same level like for 100 times, you know. So yeah, I don't need any of that frustration, so I heavily rely on cheat codes when I play Pandemonium 2. So my final thoughts on this game: I think Pandemonium 2 is a quintessential 90s 5th gen game, you know, and every time I play it, you know, I remember exactly how I felt when I first played this game. you know, it really brings a lot of memories of that era. Personally, I really wish, you know, they would remake this game, you know, just like what they've done with Spyro and Crash, you know, and Medieval or the Oddworld games, you know. I think this game has a lot of potential. I would really want to see Pandemonium with a new era graphics, you know, with modern graphics, and maybe even get a sequel or something. Despite the fact that Pandemonium 2 is not very popular, I personally think this game worth buying, you know, and adding to your collection, especially if you are into the retro gaming. So anyway guys, this was my review on Pandemonium 2. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out my other vids, and until next time.